Hi, I'm John Mayhead from Hagerty Classic Cars, and this is my 1967 Porsche 912. So today we're going to be fitting a headliner to it. I've never done this before. This isn't an instructional video. It's just following me through as I go through the process. I've never done one before. I have had some fantastic advice from various different people on the internet, and also the people who make them. And so I'm going to give it a go. I hope that maybe some of the things I discover along the way might help other people. Let's have a look. So where we are at the moment, all the interior is out pretty much. We've just about to get the headliner back in, and once I've done that, I can put the glass back in. So I've tried to keep the car pretty much as original as I can. As you can see, there is a massive hole in the roof. It's a coupe. It was a non-sunroof coupe when it was first built, but it had this big Golder sunroof fitted, a bit like a Webasto, so a big vinyl sunroof, and it was fitted when it was new at the dealer. So it's a dealer fit Webasto style Golder sunroof. So they've cut the hole, they've wood lined it, and there's quite a big hole there. Now I considered deleting that and putting it back to the way it was, but decided not to. I think it's part of the story of the car. I think it's part of its history, and to be honest, it's going to be my car for driving around, and I quite like the idea of a bigger sunroof, so I'm going to put it back. Now what that does mean for the headliner, as you'll notice, and it's kind of just pinned in place at the moment, is there are no pockets in it. Now usually on a 912 or a 911 for that matter, because they're the same chassis, and as you can see down here, there are these little tiny oval holes. Now what they do is there are little bars that fit across there, and they go through the pockets in the headlining, and they line up on a coupe. Now this one doesn't have any of those bars, and they can't actually be fitted to this. I did try, but it's not really an option. So what that means is I've got to line this thing up on my own, which might be a little bit more problematic. The other thing you can see here is already pinned in place. You see that? That's the interior light, and there's a little bit of felt that goes around that just to give it a bit of support. Now you can buy those bits of felt, and they're quite expensive. I think you have to buy them from the States, but I got them, I just got a piece of felt from a trim company and put that in. So the first thing I have to do is to line up the headliner with the roof, and without the little pockets and the rods, I have to do it another way. And the way I'm going to do this is by using the old headliner. Now I kept these, luckily, because I followed the concept that you never throw anything away, and the key bits here are this line, which is a seam line where the bits that go down the C-pillar are attached to the main headliner. So what I've done was I've lined all these up, and as you can see I've made a little mark there, blue mark. Now that's where the seam goes. What I've also done with marker pen is I've marked where the edge of the other trim pieces. So there's a vinyl covered trim piece here, and there's a piece of vinyl covered trim piece which covers the parcel shelf here. So the old headliner used to come to here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to line up this, and as you can see I've lined up that seam with the blue there. Now usually when you've got a typical coupe with the pockets in it and with the bars that go across, what you do is you put those in, you clip those in, and then you work from the front backwards. Now what you have to do is make sure it's central. So as you can see I've marked the centre of the roof, just a little bit of masking tape with a pencil line, and then underneath that I've marked the centre of the headlining. Now I've it took me a long time to get this into the right place. So I've clipped it at the front. I've used bulldog clips. I've seen things on the internet where there's a lot more bulldog clips being used than this, but at the moment this is all I've got really. So I've got a few more to clip along the C-pillar in a minute. I've also got these, which are fantastic, big heavy-duty clips that mean it's not going to move anywhere. So it's quite tight. As you can see, the actual hole pattern lines up front to back. And what I'm next going to do is start to cut round here. Okay, so you might want to question why I'm cutting. Well, what I want to do is I want to get this pinned in with the seam here lined up with here, but at the moment this is too wide. This seam goes far too long, so I'm going to have to cut along here very carefully, making sure I don't cut too far, and then I'm going to pin it all the way round. I'm going to pin this C-pillar in place. What I'll then do is I'm going to start from the centre, and I'll start gluing all the way along and work my way round. I'm going to do the back first, simply because the C-pillars are the key bit, and I can't really get that wrong. The front is a bit more flexible. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here is I've got a little row of the perforations going along here. It starts in the centre, and it does dip off slightly because of the curve of the roof, but I'm trying to keep it roughly the same on both sides. Well, not roughly, pretty much exactly the same on both sides. I've cut down to close to, but not quite at the join, so that I don't go over it. I've still got a good 1.5 centimetres, I suppose, of overlap, so that I don't find myself in a position where I've cut too much, because, you know, the old adage of you measure twice and cut once, and that is pretty critical when it comes to this sort of thing. I've still got loads of the headliner to have in place here, and I'm trying to pin this as I go down to the edge. I'm going to have to cut this a little bit more just so it fits in. Okay, so again, just cutting some little tabs in the edge. And hopefully this should tie in quite nicely. Whoa. It's the other thing, you got to make sure everything's nice and clean. Obviously wash my hands well before I started touching this today. Okay, so that is all looking pretty good at the moment. I'm happy with that. Now all I want to do is just double check probably going to do the other side as well, so that I know that those two back corners fit nicely before I do anything else. And then I'll go to the front and I'll pin out the front as well. So I've got the headliner clipped in place. It seems to be fitting perfectly. Perfectly is a strong word. It seems to be fitting well, and I've got the corners cut, which is quite a big call, to be honest. It was cutting something like this was a little bit nerve-wracking. This headliner was made by a company called Wonderland Classics, and they've been fantastic. They made it specially for me because it didn't have the pockets that the normal coupe did. It wasn't very expensive at all, and then the guys at Wonderland gave me a massive amount of advice afterwards on the phone. So it's so far so good, I think. So off camera I've had a bit of a go at this already. So what I've done is I've cut down the headliner just so it sits nicely in this little line here. and I've taken it back and I've started to glue it down towards the edges. So what I'm going to do is now finish that off. The glue I'm using is this EvoStick Impact contact adhesive. I've used this for fixing convertible tops before. It's really good because you basically glue both sides, and then you can move it around until you want to fix it together, and it's when you squeeze it together that's when it actually sticks. I'm using a pair of scissors to trim this, even though it's a little bit fiddly, but what I don't want to do is to use a Stanley blade down here, because then I could cut into the paint and get a line that could rust later on. 912 and 911 rear window seals are notorious for leaking, especially in the bottom corners, and you'll quite often find that this area here and the area of the parcel shelf are completely soaking and rotten. So I'm being uber careful really to maintain the integrity of it. It's going in okay, it seems to be at the moment anyway. What I don't want to do is to get any of these little folds in the corners. Now I'm going to go for the C-pillar. I'm going to try and get it lined up first, and again move down. I might have to cut it slightly to get it to fit properly, and then I'm going to clip it as best I can. I'm going to keep some of these clips in, especially the ones on the corners, so that I don't pull what I've already glued out of place. Okay, right at the beginning of this video I said I didn't have enough clips. I was absolutely right. So I'm going to go off to the shop now and buy some more, because I really need to clip all of this in place first before I glue it. It's already starting to get a little bit saggy here, and I don't want that. I want it to be absolutely perfect, so I'm going to go and buy a load more clips. Okay, one trip to Tesco later and I've got a load more clips, another 36, and for £3 that was money well spent. As you can see, I've pinned the top row here, and it's lined up pretty well actually. There's some folds here, but there was originally a piece of board, like a little board that pushes that down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue the top in, glue this row in, and then see if I can pin this out at the bottom and make it nice and tight. But in terms of the fit, I'm really happy with it. And up in the corner again, I can get those folds out. One thing I didn't mention is I'm doing this on quite a warm day. It makes it easier because the fabric stretches. I've also left it out in the garage getting warm for a few days now. So here's the result. I have got my bulldog clips, I clipped it all on, I stuck it all down, and there's a couple of bits just still drying, but I'm pretty happy with that. The only bit I didn't use the brush glue was for down here. I was recommended, because this is just above the engine, gets very, very hot, so I used some spray impact adhesive, which was some proper trim spray that I bought from one of the suppliers. But it's great. This line here wasn't actually cut. That was the edge of the lining, and it's absolutely spot on to where the trim comes to. So the back deck will come to about here, which will cover that up nicely. The rubber of the quarter light will come around here, and then you've got another trim panel coming on here with the rear seat covering up that bit. So that's one rear left corner done. Now onto the rear right corner. So having learned from experience, there's a good way and a bad way of doing these rear C-pillars. They're the most difficult bit. The bad way, which is the way I did first, was to try and stretch it all the way down and then cut. And the trouble is, it's very easy to cut too short and to actually cut into the headlining, which you're going to use, because it takes a bit of stretching. So what I've found is that if you just work your fingers down like this and then get another bulldog clip and then peg that in place, very hard to do with one hand while you're holding a camera. Okay, and then work on the top, keep it nice and taut. And so on, all the way down, and then you can adjust the back. You're going to have to cut in here because the tension, as you can see there, is creating fold, and up the top here. But it's getting this nice and flat and straight all the way down, which is important. So there we have it, good day's work there. As you can see, we've got all of the headliner in. We've got these little tiny clips just helping the front to stay in place. Those were the original ones that Porsche put on. And all I've got to do is finish off around these corners here. And as you can see, what I haven't done yet is I haven't cut the sunroof out, but that's another day's work. Other than that, I'm really happy how it's gone. It's really tight. It was just a case of feeding around all the corners, and yeah, so learned quite a lot today, really. And the biggest one are these, which are bulldog clips. You can never have too many bulldog clips when you're doing this. So I hope that's been useful, and we'll come back and do some other things with the 912 on another day. Bye bye.